The story opens in the royal palace of Thebes. It is revealed that many years earlier, Oedipus had solved the riddle of the Sphinx and since then ruled as king. As the play begins, a group of sorrowful priests enters in a solemn procession, soon followed by Oedipus, who walks with a slight limp and is accompanied by his guards. Oedipus's limp is the result of his ankles being pierced and bound by Laius and Jocasta. His parents, though he is unaware of this, when he was an infant, in an attempt to prevent the prophecy that he would one day kill Laius. Their efforts failed, and the limp remains as a mark of his fate, though he does not yet understand its meaning. Oedipus asks the priests why they have come, already knowing that Thebes is afflicted by a devastating plague. He assures them that they can rely on him for help in every possible way. A priest, speaking with deep emotion, describes the city's suffering. The crops have failed, the cattle are diseased, women die in childbirth, children are born lifeless, and the people perish under the plague. He implores Oedipus to save Thebes once more, just as he had saved it from the Sphinx. The mention of the Sphinx reminds the audience of Oedipus's heroism. He had rescued Thebes by answering the riddle of the Sphinx, by discovering the truth. Oedipus replies that he is already aware of the city's distress and has been searching for a solution. He has sent his brother-in-law, Creon, to consult the oracle at Delphi and seek the counsel of the god. At that very moment, the priest notices Creon returning from his journey. Oedipus appears as a strong and capable ruler who has already taken the necessary steps expected of a good leader by seeking divine guidance. Creon delivers Apollo's message. Before Oedipus became king, Laius, the previous ruler, was murdered, and his killer was never found. According to the oracle, the murderer still lives within Thebes, and only when he is found and punished will the plague be lifted. Just as he once faced the Sphinx, Oedipus is now confronted with another riddle, the mystery of Laius's death. In Thebes, shame was believed to bring tangible misfortune, and the plague is seen as the consequence of leaving the former king's murder unpunished. Oedipus questions Creon about the details of King Laius's death. Creon explains that Laius had left Thebes to consult the oracle of Apollo and never returned. Only one witness to the murder survived and made it back to the city, claiming that a group of thieves attacked and killed the king. Oedipus then asks why no effort was made to find the killers. Creon replies that at the time, Thebes was suffering under the curse of the Sphinx. Hearing this, Oedipus vows to take upon himself the task of discovering the murderer. Oedipus shows himself to be a man of courage and decisive action. If his own king had been killed, nothing would have stopped him from seeking justice, and now he declares that nothing will prevent him from doing the same. Creon, in contrast, is more practical and cautious, believing that after the city had just escaped the Sphinx's terror, the search for Laius's killer had seemed impossible. At this moment, the chorus enters, representing the elders of Thebes. They march around an altar, chanting and calling upon the gods to save the suffering city. The chorus recites the city's misfortunes and appeals to the divine powers, the rulers of fate, to bring relief and restoration. Oedipus then commands that anyone who knows anything about Laius's murderer must come forward. He offers mild treatment and possibly a reward to anyone who reveals helpful information, but declares that if anyone withholds the truth, that person must be banished. Oedipus pronounces a powerful curse upon the murderer. He adds that even if the murderer turns out to be a member of his own family, the same punishment must apply. Driven by determination, Oedipus acts swiftly to uncover the truth. He believes the story that Laius was slain by thieves, yet he remains blind to what truly happened. In his ignorance, he unknowingly curses himself. Now my curse on the murderer, whoever he is, a long man unknown in his crime or one among many, let that man drag out his life in agony, step by painful step. To the audience, who already know the myth, his words reveal a tragic irony, as Oedipus seems to speak his own fate into existence. He reproaches the people of Thebes for not seeking Laius's killer with greater resolve, and declares that he will defend Laius as if he were his own father. Oedipus curses anyone who disobeys his command. The leader of the chorus then suggests that Oedipus summon Tiresias, the blind prophet. Oedipus replies that he has already done so. Soon after, Tiresias arrives, guided by a young boy. This moment again reveals Oedipus's strong leadership, as he is always one step ahead of those around him. Yet his words, promising to fight for Laius as though he were his own father, show the depth of his tragic blindness to the truth. Oedipus calls upon Tiresias, the prophet, to help Thebes end the plague by revealing the identity of King Laius's murderer. However, Tiresias resists and refuses to speak, asking instead to be sent home. Despite Oedipus's insistence and insults, the prophet remains silent, unwilling to disclose the truth he knows. The blind seer perceives reality clearly, but chooses silence in an attempt to protect Oedipus from the devastating knowledge. This refusal brings him into conflict with Oedipus, who only seeks to save his city. Frustrated and angered, Oedipus accuses Tiresias of conspiring in Laius's death. Offended, Tiresias finally declares that Oedipus himself is the source of the plague, the very murderer he seeks. As their argument intensifies, Tiresias hints that Oedipus is guilty of even greater wrongs. Confident in his own judgment, Oedipus believes he understands the situation better than the prophet. Blinded by anger, he refuses to listen and convinces himself that Creon persuaded Tiresias to make these claims in an effort to overthrow him. He mocks the prophet's blindness and calls him a fraud. The leader of the chorus intervenes, attempting to calm them, but Tiresias warns Oedipus that he is the truly blind one, blind to the corruption of his own life. For Oedipus, blindness means the inability to see with the eyes, but for Tiresias, it is the inability to see the truth. By calling Tiresias a false prophet, Oedipus shows his determination to resist any prophecy that challenges his understanding. As the argument continues, Tiresias foretells that before the day ends, Oedipus will discover who his parents are, and that this revelation will destroy him. Before leaving, Tiresias delivers a riddle. The murderer of Laius is a native of Thebes thought to be a stranger. He will soon be blind. He is both father and brother to his children, and he has killed his own father. Both men then depart. This riddle mirrors the riddle of the Sphinx, the one Oedipus once solved to earn his fame. But solving this riddle will bring about his ruin. The very traits that made him a hero now lead him to destruction. Though the riddle's meaning is clear to the audience, Oedipus is neither ready nor willing to understand it. The chorus enters, chanting about Laius's murderer, now pursued by divine justice and the weight of prophecy. They declare that they will not believe the grave accusations against Oedipus without evidence. The chorus reflects the voice of Thebes and helps interpret the unfolding events. At this point, the people still stand with Oedipus, seeing him as their savior. Creon enters, distressed by the accusation of betrayal. Oedipus soon follows, angrily repeating his charges. Creon defends himself, insisting that he had no knowledge of Tiresias's words and no ambition to be king. He argues that Oedipus is being irrational and suspicious. Yet Oedipus refuses to listen, declaring that Creon must die. Jocasta, Oedipus's wife and Creon's sister, then arrives. Although Creon may protest too strongly when denying his wish for power, he is correct that Oedipus makes reckless accusations without proof. Oedipus, consumed by fury and the impulse to act, appears unreasonable and unable to restrain his temper. Jocasta reproaches Oedipus and Creon, telling them it is shameful to quarrel publicly while the city suffers. When she learns that Oedipus intends to banish or kill Creon, she pleads with him to trust Creon's word. The chorus supports her appeal, urging Oedipus to show restraint. However, Oedipus interprets this as a sign that the chorus, too, wishes to see him overthrown. The chorus swears their loyalty, denying any such intent. Oedipus remains deeply unsettled, defensive, and convinced that a plot is forming against him. Some believe that his readiness to see conspiracies reflects a hidden awareness of his own guilt, which he tries to suppress. Yet, moved by the chorus's declaration of faithfulness, Oedipus agrees to spare Creon, though he admits he still doubts Creon's innocence. Creon leaves, calling Oedipus both mistaken and stubborn. In this moment, Oedipus shows a willingness to hear those around him, even if he rarely accepts their advice. When Jocasta asks how the conflict began, Oedipus explains that Creon sent the prophet Tiresias to accuse him of murdering Laius. Jocasta tells him not to trouble himself over the prophet's words, insisting that such prophecies are meaningless. Jocasta openly declares that prophecy is an illusion. Her disbelief in oracles and prophecies implies a lack of faith in the gods themselves. To support her view, she recounts a story from her past. When she and Laius were still together, an oracle foretold that Laius would be killed by his own son. To prevent this fate, Laius ordered that their newborn child, only 3 days old, have his ankles pinned together and be abandoned on a mountain to die. Laius, she says, was not killed by his son, but by strangers at a crossroads where 3 roads meet. Therefore, Jocasta concludes, prophets cannot be trusted. Once, Jocasta had believed in prophecy strongly enough to sacrifice her infant child to avoid its fulfillment. But at this moment, convinced that the prediction failed, she rejects the idea of divine revelation entirely. Yet in trying to dismiss prophecy, she unknowingly reveals details that make Oedipus suspect it might, in fact, be true. In this way, like Oedipus himself, she seals her own tragic fate. Jocasta's story deeply disturbs Oedipus, and he begins to question her further about the murder of King Laius. His unease grows when she reveals that the killing occurred shortly before Oedipus arrived in Thebes and describes Laius's appearance along with a number of men who accompanied him. Alarmed by the similarities, Oedipus asks Jocasta to summon the sole survivor of the attack so that he may recount what he witnessed on that day. Though Oedipus had been quick to accuse Creon of treachery, he is equally quick to abandon his suspicions when new evidence appears. His attention shifts again to solving the mystery. Jocasta, seeing his distress, asks what troubles him, and Oedipus begins to tell her the story of his past. He explains that he was raised in Corinth by King Polybus and Queen Merope, whom he believed to be his parents. One day, during a feast, he heard a rumor that he was not their true son. To discover the truth, he journeyed to the oracle at Delphi, where he received a dreadful prophecy, that he would one day kill his father and lie with his mother. I can hear him cry, "You are fated to couple with your mother. You will bring a breed of children into the light no man can bear to see. You will kill your father, the one who gave you life." This revelation presents the second great prophecy within the story. The first foretold to Laius and Jocasta that their son would kill his father, while the prophecy given to Oedipus adds the horrifying detail of incest. Terrified, Oedipus fled Corinth, determined never to return, hoping to prevent such a fate. During his wandering, he came to a crossroads, the very place Jocasta said Laius had been slain. There, a group of men forced him off the road and tried to kill him. Oedipus fought back in self-defense and ended up killing them all. Now he fears that one of the men he killed was Laius himself, and that the curses he pronounced upon the unknown murderer may now fall upon his own head. Realizing the possibility of his guilt, Oedipus grows fearful that the punishment of exile he declared for Laius's killer will apply to him. That alone would be disastrous, yet he still believes that by avoiding Corinth he escaped the prophecy, not realizing that the divine punishment awaits him nonetheless. The chorus urges Oedipus to remain hopeful until the witness he has summoned, the shepherd, arrives to speak. Encouraged, Oedipus recalls that the shepherd had said a band of thieves, not a single man, killed Laius. Jocasta too tries to reassure him, insisting that the events of the murder do not match the prophecy, for Apollo's oracle had said her son would kill her husband, and that son was left to die on a mountain. Together they leave the stage. For the moment, Oedipus finds some comfort and relief. If he stops his investigation here, he can still believe that he is innocent. Yet in rejecting the prophecy, he too edges toward denying the power of the gods. Left alone, the chorus chants of the gods who rule from Olympus, those who punish the proud and protect the just. But the chorus also warns that if sinners go unpunished or if the divine oracles prove false, then faith in the gods themselves will falter. At this point, the stakes could not be higher. The prophecies seem increasingly doubtful, and if they fail, what reason would anyone have to trust in prophecy, or even to believe in the gods at all? Jocasta enters and makes an offering to Apollo, hoping to calm Oedipus's troubled mind. At that moment, an old messenger arrives from Corinth, bringing news that the people there wish to make Oedipus their new king. King Polybus of Corinth, the man Oedipus believes to be his father, has died. Jocasta rejoices at the message, seeing it as proof that the prophecies are false and that fate has no power over them. The report from Corinth seems to confirm Jocasta's belief that prophecies are meaningless. If Polybus has died of natural causes, then Oedipus cannot have fulfilled the prophecy that he would kill his father. When Oedipus enters and hears the news, he feels relieved and celebrates with Jocasta. Together they mock the oracles, declaring that chance, not the gods, governs the world. Such a belief, that randomness rules instead of divine will, is an act of blasphemy. From this point on, everything begins to fall apart. Jocasta urges Oedipus to put aside his fears, but Oedipus confesses that since his mother is still alive, a part of the prophecy might yet come true. Despite his attempts to dismiss fate, Oedipus cannot entirely silence his doubts or his sense of guilt. When the messenger asks what troubles him, Oedipus reveals the prophecy he once received, that he would kill his father and lie with his mother. He explains that this fear drove him away from Corinth. The messenger then assures Oedipus that he has nothing to fear, for Polybus and Merope were not his real parents. In trying to comfort him, the messenger unknowingly delivers the very message that seals Oedipus's doom. Fate cannot be escaped. The messenger explains that years ago, he found a baby abandoned on the slopes of Mount Cithaeron, near Thebes. The child's ankles had been bound together, and he freed them before giving the baby to Polybus as a gift. That child, he says, grew into the man now standing before him, Oedipus, who still bears the scars of that injury. When Oedipus asks who the child's parents were, the messenger says he does not know, for he received the infant from another shepherd who had served King Laius. The mark on Oedipus's ankles reveals the truth he cannot yet see. His wounds are the sign of his fate. Though he once solved the riddle of the Sphinx, he remains blind to the riddle of his own life. Jocasta instantly recognizes the meaning of the story, while the chorus tells Oedipus that the shepherd mentioned by the messenger is the same man who witnessed Laius's murder. Now realizing the dreadful truth, Jocasta pleads with Oedipus to stop searching for answers. Oedipus misunderstands her desperation, thinking she fears he might discover he was born of lowly parents, which could disgrace her. She insists that this is not the reason and begs him again to leave the matter alone. When he refuses, she cries out in anguish, calls him a man of agony, and rushes into the palace. Knowing the truth, Jocasta tries in vain to escape it, clinging to the hope that ignorance might spare them from ruin. But Oedipus, blind to what lies before him, presses onward, determined to uncover his origins no matter the cost. Soon the shepherd arrives, and the messenger confirms he is the same man who gave him the baby long ago. When they question him, the old shepherd refuses to speak of the child. This is a moment filled with tragic irony. The truth is clear to everyone except Oedipus himself. Like others before him, the shepherd tries to conceal the truth, but Oedipus's relentless pursuit forces it into the open. When the shepherd remains silent, Oedipus threatens him with torture and even death. At last, the shepherd breaks down and confesses that the baby was the son of Laius and Jocasta. Ordered to kill the child because of the prophecy that he would murder his father, the shepherd took pity and instead gave the baby to the messenger. The shepherd is the final barrier between Oedipus and his destruction, and fittingly, he is the most reluctant to reveal what he knows. Yet Oedipus, driven by his obsession with the truth, forces the revelation that condemns him. When he finally understands who he is and that the prophecy has been fulfilled, he cries out in horror and rushes into the palace. The messenger and shepherd depart, leaving behind a man who has at last seen the truth. Everything is revealed. Oedipus knows who he is, and in that moment of recognition his blindness ends, but his guilt, shame, and ruin fully descend upon him. The chorus, left alone upon the stage, first sings of Oedipus's greatness among men, recalling his triumphs and his wisdom, and then turns to mourn the dreadful fate that brought about his destruction. They lament that though Oedipus once saved Thebes from the Sphinx, it would have been better for the city if he had never appeared at all. Even though his crimes were committed without knowledge, they are so horrifying that the very people he once saved now shrink from him in disgust, wishing they could be blind to his presence. A second messenger enters, bringing grim news from within the palace. Jocasta, overcome with grief, locked herself in her chamber to mourn Laius and her own wretched destiny. In a frenzy of despair, Oedipus rushed through the palace with his sword drawn, calling out for Jocasta and cursing her. He broke down the door to find that she had hanged herself. Weeping, he took her in his arms, lowered her body, and overcome by anguish, tore the golden pins from her garments and plunged them into his eyes until he was blind, crying out that he no longer wished to see the world now that the truth was revealed. Dark horror of darkness, my darkness, drowning, swirling around me, crashing wave on wave, unspeakable, irresistible headwind, fatal harbor. Oh, again, the misery, all at once, over and over the stabbing dagger, stab of memory raking me insane. Oedipus's deliberate blinding of himself stands as one of the most shocking acts in all tragedy. As in most Greek drama, the violence takes place beyond the stage, later recounted by one who witnessed it. The weight of truth, guilt, and shame has driven Jocasta to death and Oedipus to self-destruction. The chorus and the messenger are filled with sorrow and pity. When Oedipus enters, covered in blood, they can hardly bear to look at him. Speaking through his torment, he laments his agony, the darkness that now surrounds him, and his madness. He begs to be cast out of Thebes as one accursed and wishes he had perished as an infant. Although his past remains revolting, his act of blinding himself transforms him from a figure of horror into one worthy of compassion. Oedipus is now more victim than villain. He delivers a long, anguished speech about the dreadful things he has done and suffered, declaring that all was decreed by Apollo. Yet he insists that it was his own hand, not the gods, that took his sight, claiming this act as his own choice. When the chorus asks why he chose blindness over death, Oedipus answers that he could not bear to meet his father and mother in the afterlife, nor could he endure to look upon his children or his people in this world. He pleads to be hidden, slain, or thrown into the sea. Though Tiresias had foretold that Oedipus would end his life blind, Oedipus insists that this was his own doing. He did not choose to kill his father or to marry his mother. Those were the workings of fate, but blinding himself was his response to the punishment the gods imposed upon him. Creon then enters, and the chorus expresses hope that he will restore order to Thebes. Creon forgives Oedipus for his past deeds and commands that he be brought inside, so that his shame may be hidden from public sight. Oedipus begs Creon to banish him, believing that his exile will save the city. Creon agrees, but only after consulting the oracle to confirm the god's will. Oedipus declares that his sons are grown and can care for themselves, but pleads with Creon to look after his daughters, Antigone and Ismene. As Oedipus once brought order by solving the riddle of the Sphinx, Creon now restores stability to Thebes. Yet his rule differs from Oedipus's. Where Oedipus was bold and defiant toward fate, Creon is cautious and obedient to divine guidance. At Oedipus's request, Creon summons Antigone and Ismene. They arrive weeping, and Oedipus embraces them tenderly. In tears, he warns that they will suffer rejection because of his sins, that as the children of an incestuous union they will never find husbands, and he urges them to pray for a gentler fate than his own. Oedipus's fears prove true, for his family's misfortune continues into the next generation. In Greek tragedy, guilt and shame often pass from parent to child, binding families to sorrow. Creon then ends Oedipus's meeting with his daughters, and again refuses immediate exile until divine approval is given. When Oedipus pleads for more time with his children, Creon reminds him coldly that he no longer holds any power in Thebes. At first, Creon's words seem merciful, but he soon reveals his authority and control, yet in the end, Creon too will be proven wrong. In time, as told later, Oedipus will find a new kind of strength even in his ruin, a power Creon will try to command. All depart except the chorus, which delivers the final lament. They declare that even the mightiest and most skilful of men can be destroyed by fate. The play closes with their solemn words: "No one should be called happy until the moment of death, when the pain of life is finally ended." All human effort to defy the will of the gods leads only to greater suffering, and only in death can one find peace from the trials of life. With this, the first play ends, and now we go to the future. Many years have passed since Oedipus was banished from Thebes, the city he once ruled. The story begins in the sacred grove of the Furies at Colonus, a place near and governed by the great city of Athens. Oedipus now appears as a broken figure, blind, frail, and dressed in rags, guided by his devoted daughter Antigone. The prophecy once declared that Oedipus must be punished for the dreadful crimes of killing his father and marrying his mother. Now, as an aged and blind wanderer who must rely on his daughter for every step, that punishment has been fulfilled. Acceptance, that is the great lesson suffering teaches. Suffering and the long years, my close companions, yes, and nobility, too, my royal birthright. Oedipus tells Antigone that through his long suffering he has learned the meaning of acceptance. He asks her to find a place where they may rest and wonders where fate has brought them. Antigone, gazing ahead, recognizes the distant site of Athens but cannot name their exact location. From the sacred stillness of the place, however, she senses that they are standing on holy ground, and so they decide to pause there. Oedipus's reflections on acceptance reveal that his great pain has made him wiser than he was in his earlier years as the proud and impulsive king of Thebes. Once he defied the will of the gods, struggling to escape the fate laid out before him. Now he meets his destiny with humility and peace. Soon, a local citizen of Colonus approaches and sternly commands them to move away, warning that they have entered sacred ground, the grove of the Furies. Oedipus, however, believes this is not a warning but a divine sign. He declares that this is the place where he is meant to remain, his final refuge. He asks the man to summon King Theseus, promising that if Theseus grants him a small favor, great blessings will come in return. The man departs, and Oedipus prays to the Furies. In his prayer, Oedipus recalls that in the same prophecy where Apollo foretold his tragic fate, the god also promised that there would come a time and a place, a grove dedicated to the Furies, where Oedipus would find peace, and where his life would reach its destined end. The Furies, ancient spirits of vengeance, punish those who break the natural order, such as the slayer of a parent or the one guilty of incest. That this grove is foretold as Oedipus's final resting place suggests that his long years of torment, blindness, and exile have brought him atonement. Through his suffering, he has earned forgiveness and redemption from both the Furies and the gods. Unlike in his past, Oedipus now submits fully to the prophecy, trusting its promise rather than defying it. Soon, more citizens arrive, the chorus of Colonus, seeking the stranger who has dared to trespass upon the sacred ground of the Furies. When Oedipus speaks to them, they urge him to step away from the grove. With Antigone's aid, he moves a short distance and seats himself upon the rocky ground just beyond the sacred boundary. They ask his name and origins. Reluctantly, Oedipus reveals his identity. At the sound of his name, the chorus recoils in fear, horrified to realize that the infamous Oedipus stands before them. They command him to leave their land at once, fearing that his cursed presence will bring ruin upon their city. This moment shows how Oedipus's terrible reputation has spread far beyond Thebes. No matter where he travels, his name alone brands him as an outcast. Even here, in a place of sacred peace, the people of Colonus regard him as one doomed by the gods, a man whose very presence threatens misfortune to all who shelter him. Antigone pleads with the citizens of Colonus to show pity and compassion toward her father. Oedipus then speaks, asking that they not condemn him merely because of his name. He acknowledges that his actions brought great suffering, yet insists that he committed them without knowledge or intent. He appeals to the honor of Athens, known as a land of justice and a protector of the helpless. Soon a rider approaches. It is Ismene, Oedipus's other daughter. Their reunion is filled with affection and sorrow. Ismene then brings troubling news. Oedipus's two sons are locked in a bitter struggle for the throne of Thebes. The younger, Eteocles, has seized power and driven out his elder brother, Polynices. Polynices has taken refuge in Argos, where he is gathering an army to march against Thebes, now ruled jointly by Eteocles and Creon. Oedipus's daughters remain loyal and devoted, caring for the father the world has cast aside. His sons, however, have abandoned him, seeking only power and bringing ruin upon their family. Their rebellion against both father and brother defies natural law, and Oedipus's own fate stands as a warning that the gods punish such defiance. Ismene continues, telling her father of a new prophecy from the oracle. The people of Thebes, who once exiled Oedipus, will soon seek to bring him back. The prophecy declares that Oedipus's presence near a city will grant that city divine protection. The Thebans, therefore, will wish him to dwell near their borders, but not within their walls. When Oedipus asks if they would grant him a proper burial in Thebes after his death, Ismene sadly answers that they would not, for he had slain his own father. She adds that his sons already know of this prophecy. By enduring his punishment and accepting his fate, Oedipus has transformed his curse into a source of power. His presence now offers a blessing capable of defending entire cities. Yet even as the Thebans desire the protection he brings, they continue to reject him as one of their own. Enraged by this hypocrisy, Oedipus swears never to return to Thebes. He pours out his fury upon his sons, condemning them for abandoning him and for their silence after his disgrace. He blesses his daughters for their love and loyalty, but vows that his sons will never receive his aid. Turning to the chorus, he declares that if they protect him from those who will soon come to seize him, they will gain a savior for their land. This outburst of anger recalls the passionate temper Oedipus once showed in his youth, yet now his rage is righteous, directed not against the innocent or the gods, but against those who have truly betrayed him. The leader of the chorus, moved by Oedipus's suffering, explains that he must perform sacred rites to appease the Furies, whose holy ground he has entered. Oedipus sends Ismene to a nearby spring to complete the rituals. In doing so, Oedipus again shows his reverence toward the gods. Though he no longer fears men and may meet them with fury, he remains humble before divine will. Through obedience and faith, he continues the path of redemption that his long suffering has begun. The chorus gathers around Oedipus and urges him to reveal the full truth of his suffering. Though he is reluctant and weary of recounting his past, they have heard only rumors and wish to hear his story from his own lips. With great pain, Oedipus confesses that his daughters are also his sisters, that he once married his own mother, and that he killed his father. Yet he defends himself, insisting that his actions were not committed with knowledge or malice. He explains that he killed in self-defense, unaware of his victim's identity, and that he did not know his wife was his mother. In his earlier life, Oedipus had been his own most severe judge, punishing himself through blindness for the crimes he believed were his own. However, after years of suffering, he has come to understand that his deeds were the work of fate rather than deliberate wrongdoing. Having acted in ignorance, he no longer bears the same guilt. At that moment, Theseus, the king of Athens, arrives. Knowing Oedipus's tragic story, he speaks to him with compassion and asks what has brought him to their land. Oedipus expresses gratitude that Theseus does not demand him to repeat his tale, and explains that he brings a gift. If Theseus allows him to be buried at Colonus, Oedipus will fulfill a divine prophecy that promises protection and prosperity for Athens. Theseus graciously agrees. Theseus embodies the image of the ideal ruler, wise, courageous, and merciful, a true guardian of the afflicted. His willingness to welcome Oedipus contrasts sharply with the cruelty of the Thebans, who would only permit Oedipus to be buried beyond their borders. Oedipus warns Theseus that the Thebans will soon attempt to seize him, for they seek to use him for their own advantage. Theseus then asks why Oedipus refuses to return to his homeland if they desire his return so eagerly. Oedipus replies with sorrow, recounting the pain of his exile and the betrayal he suffered. He speaks of how swiftly love can turn to hatred, how nations and people can shift from friendship to hostility in the blink of an eye. He concludes that only the gods remain steadfast, and they have promised to protect the city that grants him rest. Oedipus has learned from bitter experience that fortune can change without warning. Once he was the proud king of Thebes, the next he was a blind wanderer cast from his home. He knows that the Thebans now seek not reconciliation but profit from his fate. His trust in the gods, rather than in men, reflects the wisdom earned through endless suffering. Theseus offers Oedipus a place to stay, whether within Athens or in Colonus, and solemnly vows that no one will take him away by force. With this promise, Theseus departs. Through his compassion, Theseus preserves Athens's noble image as a city of justice and mercy. By granting refuge to Oedipus, he restores dignity to a man who had long been an outcast. Oedipus, once without home or country, has finally found a place of peace and belonging. The chorus gathers around Oedipus, singing in praise of his new home, Athens, and especially the grove of Colonus. Their chant celebrates the city's beauty, its horses, and the favor granted by the gods, particularly Poseidon. Sophocles, an Athenian, would have pleased his audience with this patriotic homage. Suddenly, Antigone warns that Creon is approaching. Creon enters, claiming he comes not with force, but to persuade Oedipus to return to Thebes. He professes grief for Oedipus and pleads for him to come home. Creon's words are false. As Ismene has already told Oedipus, the Thebans seek only to exploit him to protect their city. They neither mourned him nor intend to honor him in death. Oedipus responds with an angry, impassioned speech. He recalls that when he first wished to leave Thebes, Creon refused him exile, and then, when Oedipus chose to live out his days at home, Creon drove him from the city. Now finally settled in Athens, Creon comes again, not to bring him back to the city itself, but only to its border, and not out of love, but to keep Thebes safe from Athens. Oedipus commands Creon to leave. His rage surfaces once more. Unlike his earlier misdirected anger in Oedipus Rex, this fury is justified, aimed at those who have wronged him. Creon retorts, calling Oedipus a disgrace to old age, and orders his guards to seize Antigone and Ismene and take them toward Thebes. The chorus condemns the act, but is powerless to stop it. As Creon tries to leave, the chorus blocks him. Creon grows furious and threatens to take Oedipus by force, grabbing him. The chorus cries out for help. Creon implies that Oedipus remains unreasonable, as he was in his youth. Yet it is Creon who fails to distinguish between obeying the gods and obeying human will. At that moment, Theseus arrives with armed escorts. He demands to know why he was summoned so urgently. Oedipus explains, and Theseus immediately dispatches troops to pursue the kidnappers and recover the girls. Theseus acts decisively, upholding his promise to protect Oedipus. He refuses to let Creon leave until the daughters are returned safely, denouncing Creon's violent actions as a shame to Thebes. He emphasizes that Thebes, like Athens, has laws and would not condone such a kidnapping, and adds that he would never presume to take someone from Thebes without the king's permission. Theseus draws a clear distinction between acting justly according to law and using force to seize what one wants. Creon remains defiant, claiming that Athens should not protect a father-killing, incestuous exile like Oedipus, and that is why he took matters into his own hands. Though acknowledging his weak position, he vows to resist Theseus as long as possible, declaring that his anger can never age and fade away. Creon believes Oedipus can never atone for his sins, but in doing so he defies the gods, who alone determine who is redeemed. Oedipus delivers another forceful speech against Creon, defending himself. He insists that his terrible deeds were committed unknowingly and without intent to harm. Confident in his innocence now, he calls upon the Furies to avenge him. Theseus orders Creon to be led to where Oedipus's daughters are held. Creon submits but remains defiant, warning that the situation will change when he returns to Thebes to raise forces. Theseus promises to return the girls safely, and Oedipus blesses him. Theseus, his guard, and Creon exit. Creon's stubborn insistence on using force rather than respecting law, even while surrounded on foreign soil, marks his undoing, a flaw that will be central to his downfall in Sophocles' Antigone. The chorus envisions a battle between Theseus and his men and Creon's guards, who have taken Antigone and Ismene. They foresee a glorious victory for Theseus and pray to Zeus, Athena, Apollo, and Artemis to grant success. In keeping with Greek drama, the battle itself occurs off-stage, with the chorus's imagination guiding the audience. Soon, Theseus returns with his attendants, escorting Antigone and Ismene. Overjoyed and relieved, Oedipus thanks Theseus and asks what happened. Theseus reports that he has kept his promise but does not boast, preferring deeds over words. His humility contrasts sharply with Creon's earlier pride in his military power. Theseus then informs Oedipus that a man claiming to be related to him has arrived from Argos, seeking help at Poseidon's altar, and now requests an audience. Oedipus realizes the man must be his son, Polynices. His status has changed. Polynices, like Creon, has traveled far to gain his favor. Oedipus is reluctant to see his son, but Antigone and Theseus urge him to listen, and he agrees. Oedipus has hardened his heart against his sons for abandoning him during his exile and poverty. The chorus surrounds him, chanting about life's miseries and the certainty of death. They claim that the luckiest man is one who has never been born, and among those born, the luckiest are those with brief lives. After youth, they say, life is filled with pain, envy, and loneliness. The chorus suggests that being born is a greater curse than not existing, and old age is particularly harsh. Antigone announces that a man is approaching, weeping. Polynices enters, sorrowful, lamenting his father's and family's pitiable state. He calls himself the worst man alive for failing to aid his exiled father and begs for mercy. Oedipus does not respond. Polynices then turns to Antigone and Ismene for support. Antigone tells him to explain his purpose to their father. Polynices expresses genuine remorse, admitting that Eteocles, his younger brother, seized Thebes by bribing people and banished him. Polynices fled to Argos, married, made alliances, and raised an army now ready to attack Thebes. He asks Oedipus to forgive him and support his cause, noting that oracles claim that the side Oedipus favors will win. He describes himself as a beggar and exile, while Eteocles is a tyrant, and promises that with Oedipus's support, he will reclaim Thebes and bring Oedipus home. The chorus urges Oedipus to speak, but he remains silent. Polynices compares his fortunes to his father's, highlighting his own success and Oedipus's suffering. This angers Oedipus, who unleashes curses upon Polynices. He expresses gladness that Polynices is an exile, recalling how his son helped drive Oedipus from Thebes. Oedipus predicts that Thebes will not fall to Argos, and that Polynices and Eteocles will destroy each other in battle. He sends Polynices away, his doom pronounced and curses ringing in his ears. Oedipus, empowered by suffering and prophetic insight, shows no mercy, just as the gods punished him for actions beyond his control. Polynices, before leaving, asks his sisters to give him a proper burial if Oedipus's curses come to pass. Antigone pleads with him to abandon the attack, but Polynices refuses, driven by humiliation and honor. He will not disclose Oedipus's prophecies to his army. He bids Antigone a mournful farewell, praying to Zeus to grant her happiness if she honors her promise. Then he departs for Thebes, certain he is heading toward his doom. Polynices's stubbornness ensures that Oedipus's prophecy will be fulfilled, just as Oedipus's own obstinacy led to his downfall in Oedipus Rex. Fate in Sophocles's works operates through the characters, using their traits against them. Antigone's vow to bury Polynices sets the stage for the conflicts explored in Sophocles's Antigone. Thunder crashes across the sky, frightening the chorus. Oedipus, sensing that his death is near, calls for Theseus. The thunder rumbles again, and the chorus cries out in terror. As the storm continues, Oedipus tells his children that the end has come and he may die at any moment. The thunder signals the involvement of the gods in Oedipus's fate. He has become like a prophet, aware of the hour of his death and what must be done. The chorus urges Theseus to come quickly. When the king arrives, Oedipus explains that he wishes to fulfill the pledge made to Theseus. Theseus asks what he must do, and Oedipus says he will lead him to the place where he will die. Soon I will lead you on myself, no hand to lead my way, to the place where I must die. Never reveal the spot to mortal man, not even the region, not where it lies hidden. Only Theseus must know the location, and the secret must never be revealed. After Oedipus's death, Theseus and his descendants may pass on the secret, so that the presence of Oedipus's grave near Athens will bless and protect the city. Theseus, recognizing Oedipus's importance as a protector of Athens, is trusted by Oedipus to keep the secret. A bond has formed between them, for Theseus will be with Oedipus in his final moments. Oedipus rises on his own strength and motions for his children to follow. Blind yet guided by divine favor, he moves toward his resting place, accompanied by his daughters, Theseus and Theseus's attendants. Oedipus displays renewed strength and the ability to sense his path despite his blindness, a sign of the gods' favor. The chorus remains on stage, gathering at an altar to pray to the gods of the dead, the Furies, and the gatekeeper of Hades, asking that Oedipus's passage to the underworld be smooth and that he may finally rest in peace. Oedipus, no longer a cursed man, has earned a tranquil eternal rest through his suffering. A messenger enters, announcing Oedipus's death and describing the events. The party followed him down a steep descent to a resting place. His daughters bathed him in spring water and dressed him in linen. Thunder rumbled as Oedipus embraced his weeping daughters, expressing his boundless love. Then a divine voice declared that it was time for Oedipus to fulfill his task. The chorus's prayers are answered. The gods themselves oversee the final moments. Oedipus accepts his death without resistance, at peace and flanked by his daughters. He asks Theseus to watch over them, and Theseus pledges to do so. Oedipus gives his final blessing and instructs everyone except Theseus to leave. When they look back, Oedipus has vanished, and Theseus stands covering his eyes in awe before kneeling to pray. And Oedipus, we couldn't see the man, he was gone, nowhere, and the king, alone shielding his eyes, both hands spread out against his face as if some terrible wonder flashed before his eyes and he could not bear to look. In Greek theatre, dramatic events often occur off-stage, reported later by a messenger. Here, even the messenger could not witness the marvel of Oedipus's death. Antigone and Ismene enter, chanting a funeral dirge. Answering the chorus, Antigone confirms the miraculous nature of the event. Overcome with grief, she admits that without their father, She and her sister are uncertain where to go or whom to turn to. Antigone has guided and supported her father until now, and her grief reveals her passionate and determined nature. She and Ismene are left as orphans. Theseus enters, advising the daughters to cease excessive mourning, for grieving too much after Oedipus received such a blessing could anger the gods. Antigone asks to see her father's tomb, but Theseus refuses, honoring his oath to Oedipus. She accepts his decision and ends her mourning, requesting that she and Ismene return to Thebes to try to prevent the war between their brothers. Theseus agrees to help. The chorus comforts the daughters, assuring them that everything has been set right. Oedipus's transformation into a heroic protector of Athens is complete. Antigone accepts Theseus's refusal because it follows her father's wishes and because she, too, has learned to obey the gods. In the later play Antigone, she will face a test of this obedience, refusing to break an oath to bury Polynices, showing her loyalty to divine law above human authority.